All right, good evening. It is 5:30. We are going to go ahead and ask those of you who are here with us today in person, after you finish grabbing your meal, come on down and have a seat. We want to welcome those of you who are joining us virtually as well. We're glad you're here. We're sorry you're missing dinner with us tonight, but we know you might be spending that time with your family having dinner right now. I'm going to pause here just for our interpretation slide.
Ok, buenas tardes con todos, para aquellos que están presentes y quieren unirse a esta reunión por Zoom y tener servicios de interpretación. Por favor, si usted está en una tableta o teléfono, oprima los 3 puntos en la parte inferior de su pantalla, en la esquina derecha. Oprima la opción Language Interpretation o Interpretación. Seleccione el idioma Spanish para español. Y por último, deslice el botón Mute Original Audio para solamente escuchar la interpretación en español. En la computadora, haga clic en el icono del globo localizado en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. Seleccione la opción Spanish para español. Y por último, Mute Original Audio para silenciar el audio original. Gracias.
Alvaro, do you want to go over interpretation in person as well? No interpretation for the in-person guests.
Buenas tardes a los presentes. Para aquellos que deseen servicios de interpretación aquí en la sala, pueden venir hacia mí y recolectar un equipo de interpretación para poder escuchar esta reunión en español. Gracias.
All right, thank you so much. On behalf of our Board of Education and the Educational Services Division, we want to welcome you here tonight, those of you who are with us in person as well as virtually. I'll take a moment just to check online if we have any of our dignitaries. We know that there are many commitments happening here at the end of the school year, and our time is often split between those commitments. So give me just a moment. I'm going to check through the room. I don't see anybody there right now. I'll have my team take a look out, and if you see somebody, feel free to interrupt so that they have the floor for just a moment. So again, good evening. My name is Kimber Sargent, Director of Categorical Programs, here with our last community meeting for the 22-23 school year. We thank you for coming on this journey with us, as we have had over 30 presentations since October. At our last presentation, which was just yesterday, we had a parent share that she has heard so much about the LCAP, she feels like she could present this information herself. And that really is our goal. We want you to feel you have a good understanding of the LCAP, but also have had many opportunities to provide input in how we're supporting our students. Tonight, for our community meeting, we will be reviewing a draft of the LCAP. We'll take a look at the supplemental and concentration funding that's included within our LCAP, the structure of the plan. We'll also talk about the process for asking our new superintendent, Mr. Ariano, questions that you might have very specifically regarding the LCAP. And then our upcoming meetings, which we are going to be down to 2. So we are almost there at the finish line with this cycle of our annual update. To begin our presentation, I'd like to share a little bit about the funding that's included in the Local Control and Accountability Plan, or LCAP. This is often referred to as LCAP funding or supplemental and concentration funding. Those terms are used interchangeably to mean the same. The funds per legislation are designed to support our low-income English learner and foster youth students. The programs that are included within our LCAP must be supplementary in nature, meaning these are things that are increasing or improving services for our 3 targeted student groups. Again, that being English learner, low income, and foster youth. On your screen here is some important information about how that funding is received by our district and what numbers are driving that funding. So if you take a look here, you'll see that our supplemental and concentration funding for next school year, which, if you can believe it, is right around the corner, is just under $200 million. This is a change as a decrease from this current school year of about $17.7 million. And that's attributed to a couple of factors. The first being that we had carryover funds that were included in this school year of supplemental and concentration funds. Secondly, we have fewer students next year as a result of declining enrollment. Declining enrollment is something that all districts right now in California and many of our neighboring states as well are experiencing, where we have fewer students than we did in the previous academic year. You'll see the next row goes into our percentage to increase or improve services. And you'll see the percentage there as 41.5%. And that means of the total local control funding formula dollars that we receive, or LCFF dollars, 41.5% of them would be considered supplemental and concentration funds designed to increase or improve services for our targeted student groups. And again, that number is based on our student population and enrollment. Here in San Bernardino, we have very high percentages of unduplicated students. So our unduplicated pupil percentage is 90.88. And that percentage is made up of students that would fall within the English learner, low income, or foster youth student group. If you were to line up, if you can imagine in a classroom, all of the students, and you had all of the English learners step forward, and of the students remaining, any student who was foster youth step forward, and of those students remaining, any student that qualifies as low income, those would be an unduplicated count, meaning they only count once for each of the categories. The student may be an English learner who is low income and part of a foster youth, however, they will only count one time. So that's how we get that unduplicated pupil percentage. In our district, a very high need district representing over 90% of our student population benefits from this funding source. If you have questions, I just want to invite you, if you're here in person, this is a great time to ask questions. The LCAP is complicated and simple in many ways. And so there may be things that come up as you're hearing the information that you might need clarification or want to ask a question. This is a time where we want to make sure to answer those questions. We do have a question here in person. So Mr. Moya, I yield the floor to you, sir.
Thank you. Raymond Moya, Highland Pacific Elementary. I know you said 41.5% goes to services that we already have to improve those services or to make them better. Where's the other 60% going?
So in total, our district receives over $460 million of local control funding formula, LCFF dollars. So you take that $460 million and you multiply it by this percentage, and that's how we get the amount that is supplemental and concentration. That 60%, the other portion of it, pays for the basic requirements of our school district, including our teaching staff, our administration staff, our facilities, custodial, all of the things that you would find in any district in California, something that would be required in order for a school to function.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So looking at,
There is a question in the chat.
okay.
What's the criteria for the percent, meaning which group will that student fall into first?
So it doesn't matter which one they fall into first. They don't take, for example, English learners first, and then low income first, and then foster youth first. They look at the student demographics and they identify them uniquely one time, and that becomes the unduplicated pupil percentage. But there's not an order of one that's more important than the other or used as a first filter. We do have the highest percentage represented in our low-income student group. That's where our highest percentage of students would fall, but there's not an order within that filter. And Mickey, if that doesn't answer your question, I invite you, you can go ahead and unmute if you need further information. All right. So looking here at the slide that you have in front of you or here in person that you have on the screen, thank you so much, Mickey. You'll see the structure of the plan. The LCAP is approximately 150 pages, around there once you include all of the documents. So I imagine that you don't have that much spare time to be reading 150 pages. However, we do have the draft for you so that you can access it. While I go over the structure, I'm actually going to go to the next slide. So if you have a device, you can access the digital copy of the draft. The draft is available in English and in Spanish so that you're able to access it in your language of preference. You can use your camera app to scan the QR code, or the link as well will be put into the chat to support you in our virtual setting. Those of you in person, if you have your phone, I invite you, you can take that out. And you're welcome to look at this information. You also have a copy of the handout. So if now is not the ideal time for you to be reading and listening at the same time, you'll have access to look at this at a later date. Again, this is in draft form, so this is not 100% complete. Our cycle of input is just ending today, so we are gathering all of that input and finalizing the details of our LCAP as well as the funding that's attached to each of the actions. So I'm gonna, if you'll indulge me, I'll go back to the structure of the plan so we can go over that. The LCAP has several sections. On this page, you'll see the page reference where you will find it in the draft. So there's a page reference in English and a page reference in Spanish. The general information for our district found within our LCAP begins on page 1. The successes that our district has achieved throughout the school year of 22-23 begins on page 2. The identified needs, and I'll go over each section and what's contained in there, but I just want to go over basically the table of contents, begins on page 4. The highlights begin on page 8. Information about the Comprehensive Support and Improvement Program begins on page 10. How we engage our educational partners in English begins on page 13 and Spanish on page 14. The Goal 1 metrics, actions, and analysis begin on page 19. And then you'll see it's a huge jump, a number of pages when we get to Goal 2. Goal 2 begins on page 51 in English and 59 in Spanish. Goal 3 begins on page 67 in English and 75 in Spanish. Increased or improved services, which is our last section within our LCAP, begins on page 74 in English and 82 in Spanish. At the end of the LCAP, all districts are required to include the instructions, which are provided by the California Department of Education as approved by our state board. And it provides information about how each section was completed. So that is at the end of our plan, beginning on page 101 in English and 109 in Spanish. Any questions about just the structure or the pages and how to reference them before I go to the next section? All right. We will go on to, I'm going to skip this slide. We already went over it. We'll go on to the general information section of our LCAP. In the LCAP, this is written out as a narrative form or in a paragraph form. On the slide here, you see a graphic that represents that same information. So our district has a total of 74 schools. And in our last, in our LCAP for 22-23, you might remember that it said 23 schools. And you might be wondering when we built a new school. Although we have done a lot of construction, the new school represented is our virtual academy. And so that brings our total up to 74. The enrollment of our student population last year was 46,500. So we do see a slight drop in the number of students. And you'll see a breakdown of those unduplicated student groups, with 23.2% representing our English learner group, 89.7% representing our low-income group, and 0.9% representing our foster youth group. Again, combined, when we look at it as an unduplicated percentage, it's 90.88%. On the right-hand side, you'll see a breakdown of our staffing here in the district. We are a very large urban district, the 7th largest in California, with over 8,000 employees. 48% of those are represented by our certificated staff, which includes our teaching and administrative staff. 35% is represented by our classified staff. You'll also see information in a breakdown of our management staff, as well as a category titled non-classified staff. And that will include our student workers, as Mr. Moya celebrates over there. Our parent volunteer workers, which are supported by our LCAP, are also represented within that category of employee. On this slide here, you'll see the next section within our LCAP. Again, this is given in a narrative form, and here we have provided the same information as a bulleted list. Our identified need continues to be the same needs that were identified in the first year of this 3-year cycle. Currently in 22-23, we are in year 2 of the 3-year cycle. Next year will be the 3rd year of that cycle, and we will be developing a plan for a new cycle this time next year. Our identified needs are in language arts, math, chronic absenteeism, and suspension. Something that's new and included in our LCAP for 23-24 is a program called Differentiated Assistance. Differentiated Assistance is a program where they have identified, based on the California dashboard, certain student groups that require additional support in academic and non-academic areas throughout the district. So this is not specific to one school. This is based on our district-wide California dashboard. And there are 2 student groups that are represented there. The first being our African American student group in the areas of language arts, or ELA, math, chronic absenteeism, and suspension, as well as our students with disabilities in the areas of ELA, or reading, math, and chronic absenteeism. What is unique to these 2 student groups is that they are not student groups that fall within our unduplicated student groups that our LCAP normally supports, our English learner, low income, and foster youth. So if you have attended previous presentations of the LCAP, we talked about other funding sources that are available outside of the LCAP. The other funding sources outside of the LCAP are the ones that will be supporting these 2 student groups. So our African American students and our students with disability. Together with a team of educational partners that includes our district staff, site staff, as well as parents, we developed action plans for each of these areas for each of these student groups. For each of those plans, they have goals that are set with actions assigned to them, and funding sources that include funding sources like Title I, which is meant to provide services such as intervention for our lowest achieving students. Title II, which provides professional development to our staff and leaders, as well as special education funding, which is used to target the needs of our students with disabilities. So you'll find that information in our LCAP under that identified needs section labeled as differentiated assistance. The next section of our LCAP, again written out as a narrative and pared down. This was certainly a task in putting the greatest things that we've done and paring it down, but keeping it in a font size that you're still able to read. This really only represents a very small number of the successes that we've had within our LCAP that are supported, in our district that are supported with LCAP dollars. So that includes our English learners progressing towards English language proficiency with an increase of over 8.3 percentage points. A normal amount of growth would be on the high end at 8%. So to see one of our student groups growing by 8.3 percentage points is excellent, especially in this post-pandemic era where we're seeing that there's a very high need, in particular for those English learners who didn't have that ability to have that dialogue back and forth like they do when they're here in person. So we're very excited for the growth of that student group. Our foster youth student group also has celebrated an increase of 13.6% for graduation rates. Again, that is with the support provided with our supplemental and concentration funds to help remove barriers for those students, as well as support the families so that we're able to see our students in this upcoming weeks here as they're crossing the stage and receiving their diplomas. We also held several events throughout our district. There are some that are listed here. Again, this is just a few representative events. That includes our Latino History Bee, our Literacy Fair, our Youth Summit, our Enrollment Fair, and coming soon in July, we had it last July as well, our Back to School Extravaganza to support our students as we prepare for them to return from their very short summer break. Next, we have support for our students as a whole child. So these are supports to ensure that we're removing barriers for families and for students so that they're able to actively participate in school and be in a safe space where they feel welcomed and they feel healthy. Including 15 immunization clinics. If you have a first grader, a sixth grader, or a student that participates in sports, those immunization clinics have helped to ensure that you have the proper immunizations for enrollment and participation. We've held over 67 dental events where they do things such as a screening, they'll do sealants for our students, and that happens directly on the student campus. So the student doesn't need to miss school. You don't have to provide an insurance card. There's no cost to the family, no cost to the student. We have a program in our district called Hazel Health. Hazel Health provides a telehealth option for our families that a student is able to video chat with a medical professional. This can happen at school and at home. It often happens at school. As a former elementary principal, when I had students that came into the office and they weren't feeling well, it's always awesome to see the health aide. But this gives us another option as well where they're able to interface with a medical professional. The staff assist in that interaction. So if the doctor wants to see closer down the student's throat or if they got hit to see if there's a mark, the staff will assist with that. And during this school year, we held over 5,925 visits, all with the consent of the parent. So the parent is involved throughout the process of Hazel Health. They're contacted at the beginning of the consultation with the student. If there are any over-the-counter medications that are given, it's ones that the parent has pre-approved already, and a notice or a summary of visit is also provided to the family to let them know that their child visited Hazel Health, and here were the actions that were taken and any follow-up that might be needed. Our staffing, including our teaching staff, our wellness staff, and our counseling staff, has provided more than 4,000 classroom lessons on mental health. And our counseling and therapy staff has provided more than 3,000 small group counseling, social, and emotional learning lessons for our students. Gonna just pause, make sure there's no questions. Always a little different when you have to look in person, you have to look online, make sure we're not leaving anybody out. So we'll go on to the next slide, which you see here on your screen, which goes into a program called Comprehensive Support Improvement, or CSI. If you participate at your school site in School Site Council or in ELAC, you recently have completed the school plan for student achievement, or SPSA. Some refer to it as the SIPSA. This is your plan to how the school is going to support the students. If the school was identified as a Comprehensive Support Improvement School, or CSI school, they had to include this information in their SPSA. So this would apply to Del Vallejo Middle School and Sierra High School. Del Vallejo Middle School was identified school-wide for low achievement. Sierra High School was identified for the 4- and 5-year graduation cohort. So within their school plans, they'll write specific actions on how they will improve the student achievement at Del Vallejo and the graduation rate at Sierra. This program does provide additional funding to the school site with a high emphasis on professional development for the staff at the site and support for our students in the areas of intervention. On the slide here, you'll see some information on engaging our educational partners. If you are here virtually with us or in person, please feel free to be part of this elite group of educational partners. This is anybody who has a vested interest in the success of our students. So this could be a parent, this could be an employee, this could be a family member or a community member. Really anybody, again, who has that interest in our students succeeding. Since October, we have held more than 30 hybrid meetings. So I know many are ready to be done with me presenting and give me a break. Mr. Moya says never. But we want to make sure that we reach as many families as possible, as many students as possible, as many employees as possible. The presentations have included presentations to our school board on our budget and how that is supporting our school programs. Our union partner collaboration. In our district, we have union partners on the classified, certificated, guest teacher, and school police sides. Our district staff meeting with those who are responsible for implementing the actions within the LCAP to make sure that they are supported and they have what they need to be successful in the implementation of their program. With our parents and guardians at our family meetings such as DAC, DLAC, CAC, DAAAC, SPAC, any meeting that they're willing to have me, I have tried to be there. With our students, we have our Student Leadership Advisory, where we have presented several times this year, as well as our community meetings. At each of our meetings, we offer a question and answer time. At the time that the presentation was printed, you had 10,722 pieces of input. We are now up to 11,135. We read every single one. We take every single one into account, and we look for trends of what our community would like to see our district do to support our students. And that's what shapes our LCAP. That input is exactly what shapes it. So it's important that as you engage, if you have questions, you ask the questions, or if you have an idea, we want to hear your ideas as well. On this next slide is a reminder of our goals. Again, this is a 3-year cycle. There are 3 goals that we have. The first being our academic achievement in language arts, math, and language development. Our school climate and campus environment goal, and our student, family, and community involvement and support. These goals will continue for next year. They were not changed, so they'll be the same for this last year of this 3-year cycle. Some of the trends in the input that we have received so far. With regard to each of the goals, the first box that you see there is our academic achievement, goal number 1. There's a high level of support from educational partners for intervention in language arts, math, and language development. A request for additional support staff at our school sites to help work directly with our students. And more support and enrichment for our students, including the support of field trips. That is very, very loud and clear from our educational partners that we would like to see those field trips continuing for our students. In goal number 2, you'll see the themes there listed in the middle box. The first being around attendance improvement, especially as we try to return to the new normal after in a post-COVID world. Do we come to school if we're not feeling great? Do we stay at home? And how do we balance that with our student attendance? And what can we do as a district to help promote positive school attendance? Social emotional learning and trauma-informed practices as we not only address the academic needs of our students, but also the non-academic or social emotional learning needs of our students. And a support for counseling, health, and wellness programs. The last box that you'll see there is the educational partner input for our student, family, and community involvement and support. Really focusing on bringing that active parent engagement back with our families on campus, holding events, welcomed to participate in the education of their child, providing quality translation and interpretation services at not just our whole group meetings like this, but also meetings that take place at the school site. And then providing training and workshops for our families so that they're better equipped to work with their students at home and answer those tough Common Core math problems. Might be a little different than how you have learned it, but providing them with those tools so that they can support their families. At this time, I'm going to transition. We'll have Dr. Cleveland from our Assessment and Accountability Educational Technology Department come up, and she'll be sharing some information about metrics. If there are any questions about what I presented first, I'm going to just pause as we transition for her to take over.
Good evening and happy Tuesday to everybody here in the audience and everybody online. I am Dr. Cleveland. I'm the Director of Accountability and Ed Tech here for us in our Educational Services Division. And I am here to talk through our metrics that we are using as we progress monitor all of our LCAP goals. And so I'm going to take you through where we're at, and we'll start with our academic metrics. And as Ms. Sargent mentioned earlier, we are keeping these goals into next school year. And so we're going to continue to monitor these academic metrics as we move through next year as well. So NWEA, I'm sure those of you that have been in quite a few of our meetings, as we've well established tonight, have heard about NWEA, which is our local assessment system. So it is our TK through 12 assessment that we give in the fall and in the winter. And then for our TK through second students, they give it in the spring, while our grades 3 through 8 and 11 take the spring summative assessments for the state of California. We monitor a lot of different pieces to the NWEA, but the one that we are sharing as part of our monitoring of our LCAP goal for academics is the percent of students who are on track to meeting standards in math and English language arts. So you can see that up on the screen, either here in the room or at home on your computer screen. You can see that as all students or in the 3 student groups that we do specifically monitor for the LCAP, and that's our English learners, our low-income students, and our foster youth. And you can see that overall for ELA, we are sitting at about 20.7% on track, and for our math, we are sitting at 16.6%. And then you can see the 3 additional subgroups or student groups underneath there. And I will pause for any questions from our chat.
There is a comment in the chat that we have received it and marked it down that she'd like a counselor at the high school level for English learners.
Okay, and Ms. Sargent does want me to mention that there is a comment in the chat requesting additional counseling support. She is putting that into the feedback for the LCAP. We have a question here in the audience.
Raymond Moya, Highland Pacific Elementary. I just want clarification that these are also unduplicated students, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes. All right, so the second set of data that we do monitor through our LCAP has to do with our climate and culture. And so that is around our suspension, expulsion rates, chronic absenteeism. And so you can see the data that is official data from 21-22. We will be closing out this school year and we will receive new data that we will plug into the LCAP goals next year over the summer. But you can see that our suspension rate overall is at 4.7%. Our expulsion rate is at 0.2%. And our chronic absenteeism rate did end last June at 44.0%, which is aligned with what we're seeing trending nationally. We are trending downward. I can tell you just looking month to month at our chronic absenteeism, we are trending downward in that final column. And so that's a very positive thing. And that has to do with the school sites and all of the different supports that they're working on out there, and our Office of Positive Youth Development and our Office of Family Engagement and our partnership with Loma Linda that is really helping support the reduction in our chronic absenteeism. And I will pause there at that slide for any questions. Math, I do see a question in the chat regarding math. Math will continue to be a focus, K-12. We have put additional resources and interventions in place at both the elementary and the secondary level, and we are continuing to ramp up those interventions to support the math. Any questions from our in-person audience?
Hi, Raymond Moya, Highland Pacific Elementary. Is there a targeted group that is bringing down these numbers concerning math? Like, is it elementary school, middle school, or high school? Is there or is it just grouped all students from 3rd grade till 12?
No, for the purposes of this presentation, we're looking at our total group and then our total group for each student group. When we disaggregate the data, when we're working with school sites, we disaggregate by grade level and student group. And so each of our school sites actually is working on what we're calling it's a teaching and learning plan. And so they've done a deep dive into this data by grade level, by classroom, by student. And so they've identified patterns and trends because it is different at each of our school sites. And they're working with our Office of Elementary Instruction and Secondary Ed to pull in the resources that are being allocated to the sites. So if you're a site, for example, where students are excelling in reading, then we may provide more for math or vice versa. And if that changes by grade level, then the interventions and supports will change by grade level as well. So yes, we look at that at all grade levels.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so in addition to the climate and culture pieces and our NWA local assessment, we also take a look at our college and career metrics. So where are we at the high school level? What does that look like? And how are we measuring our students' progress towards success beyond us? And so what you can see on the screen is our 4-year A to G completion rate. And the college and career, that final column, is the percentage of students that have completed at least one pathway within their high school. And so for all students, our current A to G completion rate, that means that students completed and passed all of the coursework to be considered ready to apply to a UC college system here in the state of California, is at 38.9%. And we have 30.4% of our high school students who, when they graduate, have completed at least one CTE pathway for postgraduate work. And I will stop there for any questions. I do see a question in the chat regarding cut scores for NWEA. That information is available. If you put your information in the chat, someone will get your email address to me and I can get the information regarding the score levels and the grade levels out to you. We're happy to share that. All right, the final piece of metrics that we really look at around the LCAP have to do with how we're building relationships and how that impacts our student outcomes. And so we look at two areas, our family to school communication, and every year we send out a huge family engagement survey in the fall. And so when we gave that this fall, we were looking at 78% of our respondents within the family engagement survey were favorable regarding how they feel about their family school communication. And when we think about Title I parent-family engagement, we had 63% respond favorably. And that is actually increased in both of those areas by 3% through the pandemic and into our return to school. And so we're going to continue to look at those areas and continue to replicate the practices that are working really well at our sites, and then continue to build family relationships based on the feedback that we get from all of you, and continue to monitor that work. So I'll take any questions about that. All right, I believe I'm handing it back over to Ms. Sargent.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. An important part of our LCAP includes our parent volunteer workers. So the support of getting the families notice about the survey as it comes out again in the fall helps us to make sure that we're reaching as many families as possible so that that percentage represents the large majority of our families. So if you are a family, if you are a parent volunteer worker, we encourage you to participate in that process at your school site. We are going to be transitioning now from our data and back into the actual actions within our LCAP. Again, in the presentation that was provided, you have the page number references. The metrics that we just reviewed apply to goals 1, 2, and 3. We're going to go over the actions in the LCAP now, goal by goal. So the first slide that you see here are the input from our educational partners and how that has influenced or shaped our LCAP. It's important to our district that the participants that give us the input actually have an impact on the LCAP and that you can see your fingerprints when you look at it, that these are things that you hear our community sharing, be that coming from our parent advisory groups, from our staff, from our students. It should represent our local needs. So the first was a request to clarify what low-income student achievement is. Last year, this was an action within our LCAP. That was the title of the LCAP action. So the request was to say a little bit more about what that might mean and who's receiving benefit from it. So we have broken that down into several individual actions to give more information to our educational partners, including breaking out the portions of multilingual education and how our students are supported, and the instructional materials that we provide. Providing supplemental materials for our schools, for our students, has been a priority for us, but it wasn't super clear in that action. So now in the LCAP, you will see an action titled Supplemental Instructional Materials, so that our instruction offices at the elementary and secondary level have the ability to provide intervention programs, to support summer school, to support literacy initiatives that they might have. So there's a little more specificity with that action. In our district, we had an in-house accountability system titled Focus Schools. We have our state ones, of course, which are Comprehensive Support Improvement, or CSI, or Additional Targeted Support and Improvement, ATSI. These are required by the state, but we had an additional layer of accountability here in the district titled Focus Schools. As we return to in-person, our dashboard is back on track. We're aligning those systems with our state accountability systems. So our focus schools now has been clarified as academic direct support, and this is the staff that works at the school site to support the efforts of comprehensive support improvement, as well as ATSI, or additional targeted support and improvement. So this includes every single school site having an MTSS, or multi-tiered system of supports, teacher on special assignment, that is specifically targeted to looking at data, student data, identifying evidence-based interventions, and monitoring the progress of our students. Prior to this year, we did not have that system in place at every single school. Some schools did have that system in place using their site funds within their school plan for student achievement, but with the high need for intervention, we have now allocated for every single school to have a staff member directly working on that MTSS system. We also have early childhood education. This was in our LCAP for 23-24. It is not going to, 22-23. It is not going to be found in our 23-24 LCAP. That does not mean it's not a priority for our district. It is 100% a very strong priority for our district and commitment for our district. We are slowly implementing transitional kindergarten as the law has increased the birth dates by 2 months each year. And so this now becomes part of our regular program that we provide. It's no longer supplemental, as legislation is requiring for our districts to have transitional kindergarten in every single district. It's always been a priority of our district, and we actually had it prior to this legislation, and it was included in the LCAP. But now that it's required, it will have a new funding source. Again, continues to be a priority. It just will not be funded with LCAP dollars. Last year, we had carryover dollars that were included in our LCAP that funded initiatives for intervention and acceleration. We all know, hopefully everybody in this room agrees, that intervention and acceleration is important, and that will continue. It will just have a different funding source. We had it as a one-time inclusion in the LCAP with carryover dollars. The portion that we want to make sure stays in based on our educational partner feedback is the field trip portion. So we will continue to provide funding at every single school site for field trips. The funds are allocated to the schools based on the enrollment of students after the 20th day of the school year. It's not a random number, the 20th day. That's the time by which contractually we need to have all classrooms settled. So we take the enrollment as of that day, and then a per student amount is given for each student, and the site has an allocation for field trips. If you participate in school site council, ELAC, or any other parent groups, coffee with the principal, or town halls, It's a great conversation piece for you to have with the leadership at the school as to how they're implementing the field trips at their school site. Lastly, based on educational partner input, which has actually come in over the years of having specialized programs such as STEAM at more of our school sites so that our school sites don't have to go to a magnet program. They don't have to be bused to a school that's not near their home. There has been a request to increase those STEAM or STEM programs at the schools. So we will begin an initiative of phasing in STEAM programs at school sites. Again, STEAM standing for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So that will be a new action within our LCAP as an ongoing priority for us to provide those specialized programs. Gina, we agree. It is super exciting. We agree. We do have a couple of messages here in the chat, so I want to just take a moment to review those. Thank you to Ms. Ashley for providing your email. We will ensure that Dr. Cleveland reaches out to you to provide the cut scores for NWEA. Ms. Romero, her comment says, more police are needed to monitor our schools, especially our high schools, since there are very few and there are many students, so there is more monitoring in the bathrooms. Thank you, Ms. Romero. I hope you're doing well. I know we don't have you here in person, but I hope you're doing well. School police is not funded with LCAP dollars. We will take this input, though, and we will share that with Chief Paulino to make sure that he receives that input. I'm just scrolling down. From Ms. Rodriguez, yes, it is very important to increase police in high schools. Most of them have shown between most of them are shown between closed streets, and the schools have advised the parking lots, and anyone can easily leave or enter. So again, Ms. Rodriguez, thank you for your comment. Again, LCAP does not support our school police. It is funded with a different funding source, so we will make sure Chief Paulino receives your comment. And then we have a second message from Ms. Romero. Also, having a person within the school specialized in mental health where students have the opportunity to be treated within the school, since it is very necessary, because when they are referred, many do not take the courses, but a plan can be created within, and thus they can attend, since many things happen outside and inside their home. Thank you, Ms. Romero. We agree. That focus on mental health and social emotional wellness is definitely a focus and is supported by the LCAP. You'll see that as we get into Goal 2. We also have had recent presentations from our Director of Student Wellness Supports of wellness centers and spaces that will be coming to our district as we have received an implementation grant, and we will be seeking further funding for the actual implementation of those spaces.
We have a question in the chat from Mickey Alexander. Why is math across the board low in K-8 if this is such a district focus?
If it is such a district focus? Okay, thank you, Mickey, for your question. We do see both a drop in math and language arts. It is a district focus. We have embarked on the implementation of Universal Design for Learning, which focuses on differentiating our instruction and engaging our students at the beginning of the lesson and allowing them for different opportunities for them to share their knowledge. We also have at the secondary increased the number of support classes that are available to our students. We recognize it's a metric that needs to be moved in the upwards direction, and we are looking for that growth. I can share, let me go to that slide. For our math, we did see an increase for all students of 2.2 percentage points. For English learners, we increased by 1.7 percentage points. For low income, we increased by 2.1 percentage points. And foster youth, we increased by 1.3. So we are slowly seeing those numbers increase. The NWEA is an indicator for us of the success that students will have once they do take the CASP assessment. The first time they take that is in the 3rd grade. So in kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade, we focus our attention on our intervention, and that multi-tiered system of support personnel at the school site will be utilized for that very reason, to look at our student data student by student, identify evidence-based interventions, working with the classroom teacher and the intervention staff, and then monitoring their progress. So we agree. We want math to go up. It has been a focus of ours, not only in that professional development of universal design for learning, but also in the content professional development. And I do have our director here of elementary instruction. I'm not sure if there's anything you'd like to add. We can run a microphone over to you if you do.
Good evening. So in the early years, K through 2 specifically, we're focusing on developing early numeracy, and we do have early numeracy interventionists that are working with those students to really be able to accelerate learning early on. We do also provide professional development in 2 areas. One area would be content, so deepening content instruction, as well as pedagogy. So really how to develop deeper learning in mathematics through problem solving, through number talks, various methods, but as well as deepening the learning in content areas such as fractions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Coker. Mickey, if you need a more expansion, let me know. We want to make sure the questions that you do have are answered fully. And that is the last question I see in the chat, but we have a question here from Miss Ibarra. I got you. From Miss Ibarra, thank you for being patient.
Okay. Buenas tardes. Mi pregunta sería, en las escuelas primarias y middle school también se necesita más personal para el cuidado de ellos. Eso también implementaría aquí, porque sí necesitamos ayuda en que no son suficientes los rackets, no son suficientes los de mantenimiento, e incluso los maestros ocupan ayuda adentro de las aulas con los alumnos. Son 25, 20 niños para un solo maestro, y siento que eso hace parte de que los niños no tengan una buena educación por falta de ayuda adentro de la aula y también afuera.
Thank you. We're going to have Mr. Alvaro go ahead and translate.
Okay, the question is that elementary schools staff is also needed, and is this included in the LCAP plan? For example, rate gates are needed. Maintenance staff is needed at elementary schools, and teachers need assistance as well. For example, for a classroom of 25 students, only one teacher is in a classroom. So is this part of the LCAP assistance?
Yes, thank you for your question. We do have staffing that includes teachers. So you'll see this in the next couple of slides. Under Goal 1, we have smaller class sizes, which provides additional teachers to lower that class size where we see an area of need, especially in our transition years of 8th grade and 9th grade as they go from middle school to high school, right? We're going from a single idea of math to integrated math. So we have additional staff there for that. There's also additional staff at each of the school site, including the MTSS teacher on special assignment. But we also have staff that include our resident guest teachers that will pull out students in a small group or push in and work like at the back table, with the students, so that as the teacher is teaching the students, there's that intervention piece that's built in as well. These are systems that we have built, which are tiered, right? Our teachers are number one. The work that they do with the students is very important, but we know that there are some students who need that extra bit of information, and that is definitely in our LCAP. Miss Ashley, thank you for your question in the chat. It says to piggyback on that point, when is it time for the district to change the curriculum? And the district curriculum does change based on the state adoption cycle. We are anticipating a change in our math cycle, but we will have a bridge year, and I'll have Dr. Coker from Elementary Instruction share a little bit about that timeline. So that you can see it. The current adoption that we have right now is a Common Core aligned adoption, so it matches our standard, but we do follow our State Board of Education cycle as well.
Good evening. Again, this is Dr. Coker from Elementary Instruction. Basically what we're doing right now is we're engaging a group of educators in the process right now, looking at our math materials. And so we are working with Ed Reports to really be able to take a look at the high quality instructional materials that are available and to make sure that they are aligned, of course, with our state criteria. And so the next step is to take a look at the publishers that are out there right now that have that alignment. And then we are going to begin to pilot next school year some of those instructional materials in the classroom and get the feedback from the educators. So we anticipate the new materials, the math materials, to be in the classrooms 25-26. Our language arts materials will be following a year later. And that's according, of course, to the state timelines that have been offered. But again, we are in the process right now to make sure that our students are faced with the very best materials out there.
Thank you so much. Mickey's comment is still not bought in on math. I see too many decreases as kiddos are moving grades. I can say this because my personal experience at elementary and middle high decreases each year. So I hear you all. However, I don't see any actions or real actions. I was on site on elementary and now middle. Just make this a focus, a real one with real solutions. So that passion, I appreciate your passion for this. I share that same passion as a former elementary school principal. I used to meet with my teachers about this very thing, that we need to make sure that this is something we don't let go of, that remains a steadfast focus for us. So I appreciate your passion. We will take that definitely with us. You have the ear directly here of our elementary instruction director. I know she's listening, but we also have other LCAP leads as well, making sure this is a focus. And as we have our students completing the state assessments right now, we anticipate that those scores will come in throughout the summertime, and we'll have the release of our dashboard again in December. So we are hoping to bring those positive results back, showing the work that we have been putting in, making an impact on student achievement. Ms. Cooper.
Okay, so I have two comments. The first one is regarding the math and our English learners, and Dr. Coker is here, is that it's a partnership. It's not just the teachers. It starts from home as well, and then you got to work together with the school, with your child. So, and I could just say on a personal experience, and when I talked about at our last meeting, I challenge every parent. You call elementary instruction and you go get you some summer packets. They work. I have two kids that do them every summer, and let me tell you where they're at. Right now, I have a first grader, and she's at the 81 percentile, and she's also at and I think that's in English language arts, and then math, I believe she's at 71 or 75 percentile. Doing that one packet a day, we do it every day until school starts, it makes a difference. But it's a partnership, and we have to work together as a team. Because it's not going to work unless we work together as a team. So I challenge every parent in here, an educational partner. And then my second question, since we have the director of family engagement regarding the educational field trips, for the volunteer form, is that going to be electronically, since we kind of going into technology, and also if not, can that form be sent out to parents, like in July and August when we get all the paperwork, so that parents, educational partners, we're not waiting to the very in to try to get stuff approved so you could go on field trips or be chaperones, you know, for your child's school. Get it done in July when school starts. You don't have to worry about it for the rest of the school year. That's my only 2 comments I have, and I wanted to thank everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Go ahead, Dr. Gonzalez.
So I always appreciate your comments and your feedback. And yes, we are working on a digital version of the volunteer packet. I don't know why it's taking this long, but we're actually working with Raptor to ensure that it is a parent-friendly, user-friendly system. So that is currently being taken care of. I love the idea of sending the volunteer packet beforehand. And so we will look into either sending a postcard with a link or something just to recruit more volunteers. But I will say that we went from 200 volunteers at the beginning of the year to 2,000. So, yeah, so we have increased our numbers tremendously, but good points. Thank you.
Voy a contestarle, tiene toda la razón. Los papás tenemos que estar involucrados y en eso estamos trabajando como padres voluntarios. Pero una de las cosas que han dicho los papás es la tuberculosis, que tienen que pagar para tomarse esa prueba y muchos no tienen seguro médico. Si se les diera una clínica donde ellos pudieran tomar el examen gratis, tuvieran voluntarios hasta dentro de las escuelas.
Okay, well, Mr. Alvaro, translate.
Okay, so I agree with Ms. Cooper. It's a joint effort. But one thing that I've been told about the volunteer work, it's the activities. So if there were clinics where parents can go, you'll have more volunteers at school. Right now, we have parents that don't even have insurance, but if you offer free clinics, it will be beneficial.
Yep. And I know Dr. Gonzalez is making note of that. My staff as well here is also taking that down. I take your point because as a principal, I had the sheriff's bus come and do my volunteer applications as part of the beginning of the school year because I wanted parents to be involved with their child's education. So thank you for your point, and Ms. Cooper for your point as well. All right, so if I go into the next slide here, you'll begin to see the actions that are included within the LCAP. The structure of this table has the label of the actual action. The second column states whether this is LEA-wide, which means it's a district-wide action, school-wide, which means it happens at certain school sites, or limited, which means it is particular to one of the unduplicated student groups. So on this page here, you can see an example of all three. So you'll see Advanced Learner Programs is a school-wide option. International Baccalaureate, or IB, is a school-wide option. There are only certain schools that have that program. And at the bottom, the last action there, English Learner Student Achievement, because that is targeted specifically to one of our unduplicated student groups, English learners, it is labeled as limited. In the last column, you'll see that the unduplicated groups that this action is targeted to support. Again, with the LCAP representing over 90% of our student population, we know that our students are all benefiting from these, but we principally target these actions towards student groups based on the data, right? So if we see the largest group with our low-income students, or we see the largest gap with our English learners, you'll see that that is the group that is targeted for that program support. I won't belabor it and read it to you because you do have it in your slide deck. It was provided in the chat in PDF, but you also have it here on paper. But you'll see on this slide, the following slide, which starts with our foster youth support services down to professional development. The next set of actions, these again still pertain to goal number 1 of academic achievement in language arts, math, and ELD. The structure of the table having the same layout with the action title, scope, and then the unduplicated student group. And then you'll see the next page, which starts with access and opportunities, down through library aids. Again, the same layout. And then the last slide for goal number 1, which starts with academic direct student support. This is the staffing at the school site, again, that we talked about that supports that intervention piece. Down to our 2 new actions, which will be included in our LCAP of supplemental instructional materials and science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Those would be the actions that would be included within the LCAP. I'm going to have Martha, just in case there were participants that joined us late, drop in a copy of the PDF presentation so that you have access to that. And we'll transition on to goal number 2. Goal number... We gotcha. Goal number 2 there, you will see the influence from our educational partners. In the 22-23 school year, this current school year, we had an action that was labeled health services, but it wasn't clear to educational partners what that all encompassed. As schools begin to address the academic and non-academic needs, we want to be clearer in the services that we're providing to our students and families. There has been a lot of input to provide wellness spaces and wellness centers. And with the action title of health services, it was difficult to see how that was happening within our district. So we have clarified that action and broken it down into the actions which are listed below. That includes health aides at our school sites, counseling, support staff and materials. This is at our district office level that provide the professional development and the on-site training and support for our counselors. Wellness staff and materials, which include our centralized therapists that support mental health. Climate and culture staff and materials, which includes staff that support the program Positive Behavior Interventions and Support, more commonly known as PBIS, in supporting schools with the implementation of PBIS, as well as progressing through the recognition levels of bronze, silver, and gold and platinum being the highest. We have mental health therapy staff and materials, and then additional nurses. Attendance improvement has also been clarified so that you can see more clearly the actions that are being provided to support our identified need of chronic absenteeism, which includes attendance incentives at the school sites. If you are at the school site, you might have or had a child participate in a fear of missing out or FOMO event. These are events at the school site designed to encourage positive attendance and promote improvement in attendance. We have, for the first time, also dedicated staff at every single school site that is focused on attendance. In previous years, again, it was up to the school site if they included it in their school plan for student achievement, SPSA, of whether or not they had attendance staff dedicated directly to supporting student attendance, but we want to ensure that happens at each of our schools. So each school now has an attendance staff person that is supported by LCAP funds. And then lastly, Saturday school, as we provide an enrichment program for our students in addition to our before and after school programs. The second to last bullet you see there is innovation grants. This was a program that has actually ended. This was a competitive grant that people would apply for at the school sites to implement a specialized program that would encourage and excite innovation. So this is the last year of that funding. Those programs have been implemented, so it will not be in the LCAP for the 23-24 school year. And lastly, as we see the increased need to support our student attendance, our suspension, our expulsion, as well as our staff and students at the school site, we have added elementary school vice principals at our school sites that have the highest unduplicated pupil percentages and enrollment within our district. There is a message in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and read that from Ms. Alcala. Good afternoon. How can I find out if my daughter was reclassified? When do the schools have the results? Or is there a place where I can check? I'm going to have one of my staff members send you a direct message in the chat so that we can get your information. We'll follow up on that. Any staff member at the school site, you can leave a message with them to get to the classroom teacher who would have this information. Each school also has an English language facilitator, or ELF, that helps support the reclassification of students who might be able to provide an answer to you there. Question, Mr. Moya?
Yes, it's about the attendance staff. So this is it's a position that's existed before that some schools took advantage of through maybe their student side council money or funding. So now this is going to be across the board for all 74 schools. Is this a full-time position or a part-time position? And are we going to keep track of this attendance staff's performance annually? Because why would we be paying for somebody who's doing poor work and their numbers aren't improving?
Sure.
So is that something that's written into their contracts? And it seems common sense to me, but I just want to make sure.
100%. So this is an 8-hour, 10-month position. It is considered full-time. So if you're looking to move up, there are all of these 8-hour, 10-month positions. And it is at each school site. They are a member of our classified union, CSEA, which means they are subject to the evaluation criteria that all of our classified is, which requires annual evaluations with the 10 pieces of criteria that's within their evaluation. So it's definitely something that the school site administrator will be monitoring as far as that evaluation piece goes. But in addition to that, we'll be monitoring the data because we want to put things in the LCAP that are based on our input, but we also want to see that impact on the data. It doesn't help to put in actions if we're not seeing the impact in the data, and we'll see that as we implement into year 3, where we can decide whether these actions should continue, discontinue, or be modified. So we are looking for that positive impact, and as Dr. Cleveland shared with our chronic absenteeism, we are seeing right now that that data is trending in a much better direction. So we are very hopeful that we're seeing that, but there are accountability pieces in place for the staff evaluation. The staff evaluation won't come up, obviously, as part of a community type meeting because each employee's evaluation is between them and the evaluator, but it is definitely something built into the human resources systems within the district. Question in the chat. Might be a comment, actually, now that I'm reading through it a little bit more, from Ms. Romero. Thank you very much for taking our comments into account. I know that your disposition is very good, and the district has changed many very positive things, and we know what is missing. But seeing that since I got involved in 22 years ago, we are very blessed because there are many programs, so there are more graduates. It is not easy, but impossible. Thank you very much for all your work. Thank you, Ms. Romero. You know, I always love to hear from you and see you. Thank you for being involved those full 22 years. I know I personally appreciate it, but the district does as well. Question in the chat from BR. What staff are you referring to for the evaluation? The question was if the attendance staff would be evaluated, and the attendance staff, just like any other staff member, classified or certificated, is evaluated here in the district. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, please let me know. And then Ms. Alcala, we'll get you that information and some contact information for you regarding your child and reclassification. So we'll go into the actions contained in goal number 2. You'll see the same layout as goal number 1 with the action title, scope, and the unduplicated group that it is principally targeted toward. You'll see the breakdown of health services into those individual actions as requested from our educational partners for clarity. Carrying on to slide number 2 with additional nurses down to attendance incentives. One area that you will see a change from last year to, it's such a weird space. We're like finishing up a year and almost to the next year. So it's hard to refer to the year we're in, but for 22-23 to 23-24, there will be an increase in crossing guards as we ensure the safe routes of our students to and from school, as we implement late start as well, with the end times being very near to each other. And then the last 4 actions in goal number 2, again, focused on our school climate, starting with attendance staff down to elementary vice principals. Elementary vice principals being that new action listed in goal number 2. We'll go on to goal number 3. We are almost there. I know, we're almost there. The influence from our educational partners is to communicate, to clarify what communications might mean. And that's the provision of our interpretation and translation services and increasing those and improving those. So no matter which meeting you go to, you have professional interpretation available to you. We had in goal 3 last year bilingual support. That has been moved up to English learner support, as it is more appropriate to that action rather than being in goal number 3. And then the third one, community engagement. Again, clarifying what does community engagement entail? What would that mean? And that is refers to our targeted enrollment support under the direction of Mr. Leonard Buckner, and reaching out to our families to ensure that they have accurate and timely information to enroll their students, complete data confirmation, and we share information about our signature programs such as our magnet programs and our lottery programs. And on the next page, this is a single page, but a very important page, as Dr. Gonzalez knows, near and dear to my heart, with the engagement of our families, students, and community, with family engagement, interpretation and translation, and targeted enrollment support. Dr. Gonzalez, I asked you before if you want to share anything. If you do, I invite you to join the open mic.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to talk about some of the successes or achievements that we've had this year. And just so that you guys know, I don't have the exact numbers, but we did triple the number of workshops as a result of the additional funding. We did increase our events. Our back to school event became larger, and so we were able to service more families. Our volunteer tea was amazing, and we were just able to honor a great amount of volunteers as well. And then thousands of parents have been serviced through our CHEW program, and that encompasses the wraparound services as well. One of the things that has stood out this year are the college field trips that the LCAP funding has been providing it. And just so that you guys know, we're solely LCAP funded. Our entire department revolves completely around LCAP funding. So we're very fortunate in that manner. And one of the amazing things about the college field trips is that we're allowing entire families to go on these adventures. And so what's happening is we're not only recruiting our students, we're recruiting our parents to go back to college. So that's amazing. And we went from initially 2 buses, now we're at 3 buses because we maxed out. And we also have the amazing parent volunteer workers that have come as a result of just additional funding. And currently we have 42, and we're still working collaboratively and extensively with the Personnel Commission to ensure that every site has one at the beginning of the year, of the upcoming school year. And we also have been able to add 2 additional program specialists. So I think that is amazing. A lot has been accomplished, and we're just very thankful for that. So thank you.
All right, thank you. I told her sometimes it's better to hear from someone else other than me, so you know it's true. It's the work really happens from our LCAP leads and with our leaders at our school sites. So it's always nice to hear the impact that it has and how it's supporting our families. So on the next slide here, you'll see questions that you might have. I know you had an opportunity to ask questions tonight. But you might have questions specific to our superintendent with regard to LCAP. You might be wondering if he has children, or how tall he is, or when he will be retiring, but we ask that you limit your questions to LCAP related questions. So if you had a question about a specific action or things that you'd like to have, make sure is on his list as a priority. We invite you to complete the survey. You can do that by using a device to scan the barcode here. You can do this obviously during this meeting or at a later date at your convenience. The superintendent will respond in writing. Those questions and answers will also be posted on our LCAP website. The LCAP website for our district is sbcusd.com/LCAP. To make it pretty easy for you, Mr. Moya.
Yes. Concerning Superintendent Ariano's, I guess, power or influence over the LCAP, can he veto it or change it as he sees fit? Or does he need approval from the board?
Sure. So the LCAP is Thank you. The LCAP is adopted by our school board and approved by the county. The superintendent is the sole employee of our school board, and it's his responsibility to set the vision of where we're going and how we're supporting our students. He's been very excited about what we have in our LCAP. He's an educational partner just as you're an educational partner, and he values the community input. So a scenario where a superintendent would come in and totally veto something, I don't see that. I don't see that as something that would happen, because the purpose of local control was to provide the voice to the community and to make sure that the community could see their input come into play within actions that the district is taking. It's not a plan that I write on my own, he writes on his own, is directed or dictated by a school board or superintendent. It really is a collaborative effort. And I know that that's an important priority of his, is that this is a collaborative priority. And in fact, one of the very first things that he asked for when he got here is he wanted to see that process. He wanted to see that this was presented to our parents and to our students and what the opportunities for input look like. And he's going to be bringing some more tools to even request more input through a program called Thought Exchange, which he shared last night. I guess it was last night during the Superintendent Parent Advisory Committee. So in our district, I do not see that as even within the realm of possibility. Yep. There's a question in the chat. When is the next school board meeting? Is it in this format or just in person? So our school board meets twice a month on Tuesdays. So our next one is June 6th, and the last one for the school year is June 20th, which you see here on your screen. Those are held in person here at the Board of Education Community Room. The address is 777 North F Street. There is an opportunity to provide public comment virtually through Zoom. And if you go to the district's homepage of sbcusd.com, you will find a link to submit your request to participate in public comment virtually. Otherwise, those meetings are held here in person. On June 6th, there is a public hearing where you will hear very much the same information that you heard tonight. So if you are a diehard LCAP fan, I know I'll see you there. But otherwise, you are receiving the same information that comes during our public hearing. And then June 20th, it will come back to our school board for the adoption process. Once adopted by our school board, we send it to the San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools, who is the approver of our LCAP. So you'll see those are our next upcoming meetings for us here in the district as we wind down the annual update cycle. Again, we encourage you to complete the questions for the superintendent. If you have any that were not answered or something you want to make sure is on his radar. I thank you very, very much, especially those of you who have been with me through the entire tour. Thank you for your time and thank you for your input. It's very important. We wouldn't be able to do this without the input, and I wouldn't be able to do this without the support of our LCAP leads, which we have with us here, without the team at Categorical Programs, without communications, who helps to ensure we improve access virtually and in person, without our translators and interpreters. It is truly a village. I know you see me, but there's an entire army behind this sergeant. There's a whole army. So I promise you, it's not just me. There are a lot of people supporting this work. So thank you for also supporting this work. If you're here with us in person, you have the benefit of taking food home, should you like to. So we invite you to do so. And I thank you again. We are ending nearly exactly on time. We couldn't have timed this better. So thank you so much. Have a great end of the year if I don't see you before then. Thank you.